Unfortunately, our next speaker is not speechless, so without any further ado, Mark Seifer. He's spoken at some of the other Tesla symposiums, I think all of them actually, and he's got a bachelor's degree from the University of Rhode Island, his master's from University of Chicago. His doctoral dissertation was a psychohistory of Tesla's life from the Saybrook Institute, is where he got his PhD, and that presentation, incidentally, was in partial, part of that was presented in 1984, and it was just absolutely incredible. I got to see that. He was at the Tesla conference in Zagreb, Yugoslavia in 1986. He's also been at conferences in Israel and Canada. He's published many articles on Tesla and a short video documentary. He's a handwriting expert and teaches psychology at Bristol Community College in Fall River, Massachusetts. His dissertation, by the way, is available at the bookstore. So may I introduce Mark Seifer.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to mention a couple of things that happened right before we left. I'm here with Lois. And that was that Lois's sister has a dog. And the dog has one of these little devices on there for it's an invisible fence. And so if you go around the property, if you get too close, if the dog gets too close, it gets electrocuted. So it stays, you know, away from the edge of the property. So one day it was in the middle, it was inside its house, and there was a lightning storm outside, and the dog got zapped. And I was thinking that, you know, it became maybe a cavity resonator, the whole property. The other thing, when we were flying here, we flew, while we were flying, I was looking at the slides and putting them together, and the pilot announced that we were flying over Niagara Falls, and I looked right down, and there was Niagara Falls. It was a little tiny little thing, and you could see the water bubbling over it. Okay, today I'm going to speak about Tesla and his connection to John Hayes Hammond and the history of remote control robotics. So I'm going to start the slides. I think the machine needs to be put on. One of Tesla's greatest inventions in terms of sheer ingenuity This is the best light I have. Is this the only light that's going to be here? Because I wanted to read my paper. That's my choice, huh? One of Tesla's greatest inventions in terms of sheer ingenuity, originality, and complexity of design was a remote control robotic boat, which Tesla called the Automaton. This device was unveiled at the Electrical Exposition held at Madison Square Garden during the height of the Spanish-American War in May of 1898. But earliest precursors could be traced back to wireless motors, which Tesla displayed before the Institute of Electrical Engineers in 1892. The invention comprised the following features: wireless transmission of information and power encompassing a variety of transmitters and antennae, tuned circuits and resonant receivers, the utilization of a combination of two or more frequencies to demonstrate the creation of separate channels and protected privacy, a self-contained unit able to receive commands and respond to them. In other words, artificial intelligence. Here's a picture of Tesla before the Society in London, and these, of course, are the fluorescent lights which are being ignited by wireless transmission of power. This single invention not only established all of the essential principles of what came to be known a few years later as the radio, it also lay as the basis of other creations such as the wireless telephone, garage door opener, the car radio, the facsimile machine, television, the cable TV scrambler, and remote control robotics. The precise nature of the invention, virtually its patent application, was published in most of the journals of the day. This was the brush lamp where it's a bulb inside a bulb, and this idea lies, I think, at the basis of the television tube, because these rays could be easily manipulated by electromagnetic frequencies. And this, of course, is the Tesla boat. This is William Preece. In 1892, Tesla traveled to London to speak before the Royal Society, and Preece invited him to stay at his house. He spent time there. Preece had been working with the telegraph lines since 1860 and had been associated with Edison since the 1870s. It was Preece who coined the term the Edison effect, which was a bulb which showed electronic effects surrounding it, which was probably the first electronic tube which Edison invented in the 1870s, but he had no idea of really what its use would be. So Tesla spent time with Preece at his house. It's very significant because Preece was studying ground currents, electrical energy traveling through the ground. He had telegraph lines, and the telegraph lines would create a current in the ground which could be picked up, and also there were telluric currents in the ground which would be picked up by the telegraph lines. So Preece probably was one of the very first people involved in wireless transmission. And of course in 1895, 1896, Marconi came to work with Preece. So Tesla spent a lot of time at Preece's house, and they swapped ideas. Tesla also spent time with Ambrose Fleming, who called Tesla a magician of the first order. This is Sir William Crookes. Tesla worked in Crookes's lab when he was in London, and Crookes warned him that he was getting very tired and he should be careful of his health. Tesla built a coil for Crookes, and Crookes built another coil, and he passed current through him. And in the letters you see that Crookes says he's very happy that he's been able to send the electricity through his body. Crookes also was probably one of the first people to work in wireless transmission. He sent energy from one end of the house to another, and energy through walls. And he wrote an article discussing his invention and also Tesla's invention in about 1892 in Fortnightly Review, which was very well publicized. And it's almost definite that Marconi read this, and it had to do with Tesla's wireless transmission. They also discussed the use of electricity passing through the body to help for growth, and the setting up of millions of wavelengths for secrecy. They also discussed the controlling of the weather and the relationship of weather patterns to electrical energy. One of Tesla's ideas was to change electrical energy in the atmosphere and create rain where he wanted to. Preece was also interested in psychic phenomena, and he studied crazy things like levitation, and also he was a spiritualist, and Tesla was under his sway for a while. And he then traveled back to visit home when he was in Europe. This is Oliver Lodge. He also was involved in psychic research. Oliver Lodge is probably, and Crookes and Preece are probably the three most important British scientists around the time of Tesla involved in wireless transmission, and Lodge's patents held up against Marconi along with Tesla's. This is a German picture, and you see that Tesla became world famous almost overnight with these London lectures. The first lectures were in Columbia University and then in London. And here is taken from his house in Smiljan, and you can see they're still using ox carts there. It's a beautiful area, and it's set up very much like Colorado Springs, because you've got the very long plain and then the Dinaric Alps in the back. And this is Tesla's home and the church when we were there in 1986. And another picture of the house. It's been restored. It's a beautiful place, and I think they're still working on restoring the church. And this is Plitvice Lakes, which is about 15 or 20 miles from his house. And it's just a beautiful section of waterfalls. It's a natural forest, and it's protected. And so Tesla grew up around waterfalls. And this is an identical copy of the statue. This is in Gospic. That the same exact statue was placed at Goat Island, and the Yugoslavians were instrumental in putting the statue at Niagara Falls. Okay, we're back to 1898. The exhibition was organized by New York City's leading architect, Stanford White, manager and co-owner of this multi-theater restaurant and shopping galleria, along with J. Pierpont Morgan. White, who had sponsored Tesla for early entry into the Players Club in 1892, had fashioned a rainbow room of neon lights with the inventor to highlight the beauty of electricity. And White was also the designer of Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. This is Madison Square Garden in 1898. It was the tallest building of the day. White had his private tower up there where he held parties. And there was a giant coliseum down here. There was 2 theaters. It was made with 3 different types of marbles. It was a magnificent building. It was torn down in 1929. At the top of the tower was the statue of Diana, which was designed by August St. Gaudens. And White designed many very important buildings. This is the Capitol in Providence, Rhode Island. It's the second largest unsupported dome in the world. And it's just a magnificent building. He was an incredible architect, probably the most important architect of the day, and he was Tesla's closest friend. Here's a letter to Tesla by Stanford White inviting Tesla to visit the tower for a party for an artist whose name is Mr. Abbey. And this is Evelyn Nesbit, you know the famous story with White had an affair with Evelyn Nesbit. She was 16 at the time. This was a few years later. Stanford White. And this is a letter from White after he visited the tower. Where he visited Tesla's lab. Dear my dear Tesla, I cannot thank you too much for your kindness in all your wonderful experiments. Seeing them the other day, they made a strong impression on me, as they did everyone, and I'm going to see them again someday if you will let me. And this was just a picture showing White. He was a ladies' man, and there's the tower and also Evelyn. Representing the Marconi Company at the Madison Square Garden electrical exhibit was Tom Edison's son, Tom Jr., who obtained the position through electrical editor T.C. Martin, compiler of Tesla's collected works. This liaison marked the beginning of a partnership between Marconi and Edison, as the Menlo Park wizard had wireless patents which the Italian wanted to own in order to boost his legal position on priority of discovery. The event also portended the upcoming break in the friendship between Tesla and Martin. Tesla presented his masterpiece by deceptively emphasizing mysterious aspects of his artificially intelligent machine. In demonstrating my invention before audiences, he said, the visitors were requested to ask any question, however involved, and the automaton would answer them by signs. This was considered magic at the time, but was extremely simple, for it was myself who gave the reply by means of the device. The apparatus was in the form of a mechanical boat, approximately 4 feet in length and 3 feet high, which was placed in a large tank in the center of the auditorium. By means of a variety of transmitters and frequencies, the inventor could start, stop, propel, steer, operate it. He was also planning on constructing a torpedo, perhaps to compete in the mock battles that were staged between models that were built. They had models of American ships and the Spanish Armada. Marconi, who is over here, was not actually present at the 1898 exhibit. It was Tom Edison's son who did the demonstration. Edison's son had placed bombs on the Spanish ships in this giant tank, and he would press a button and the bomb would explode. And one day he pressed a button and a bomb exploded in the back room that was in a drawer. Marconi had not yet figured out how to tune circuits. Tesla had figured out that what he had in his laboratory on Houston Street, he was having trouble having some light bulbs light and other light bulbs not light. And that led him to the theory. He studied Spencer's ideas with nerves, that led him to the idea of having 2 separate frequencies. So only when a combination of 2 specific frequencies were being ignited, a specific bulb would light. If 2 other frequencies were ignited, then another bulb would light. So you can see how far ahead he was. It appears, however, that the public appreciated the dramatic Marconi contraption, which appealed to baser instincts, as compared to Tesla's masterwork, which was 16 years ahead of its time conceptually, and at least a century ahead of its time 16 years ahead of its time operationally, and at least a century ahead of its time conceptually, that is, as envisioned in its final form. Only the scientific journals explained in a clear way the complexity of the device. Tesla's coy portrayal kindled a blitzkrieg of epithets from the press. The following article particularly upset them. It's a Tesla article. It's called "Torpedo Boat Without a Crew." My submarine boat, loaded with its torpedoes, can start out from a protected bay or be dropped over on a side ship, make its devious way along the surface through dangerous channels or mine beds into protected harbors and attack a fleet at anchor, or go to sea and circle about, watching for its prey, then dart upon it in a favorable moment, rush up to within 100 feet if need be, discharge its deadly weapon, and return to the hand that sent it. I am aware that this sounds almost incredible, and I have refrained from making this invention public until I had worked out practically every detail. Well, even today we don't have remote control submarines that could be this good. There's always mistakes that happen, like the Hubble telescope. And this is another drawing of Tesla's boat. I'm not sure how big the tank was. My feeling is it was a lot bigger than this, and I'm not sure if the boat that he actually showed floated in terms of going under. I think he wanted to make it a submersible to also go under, and he did talk to people that were making submarines at the time. Now, this is a picture of John Jacob Astor. Tesla was meeting with Astor on Astor's ship, and also trying to get Astor to get involved in funding his oscillators and his fluorescent lights. This is a picture, happens to be of Morgan's ship, but Astor's ship looked very much like this. It was called the Nourmahal, and it was a few hundred feet long, and Astor had machine guns set up on it. And Astor asked Tesla to come down to Cuba to help in the war. Maybe his devices could be used. Tesla said that he had a higher purpose, and Astor went down to Washington, donated $75,000 to the United States to set up an artillery battery in the Philippines, and donated his ship to Cuba, and went down to Cuba with a fighting crew and watched from field glasses Teddy Roosevelt storm up San Juan Hill. And so when Roosevelt came back, he was a gigantic hero. This was a cartoon of the day, and you can see how famous Tesla was, sending current through his body linked to the whole Spanish-American War. Dewey used wireless devices to coordinate his ships, and he sunk the Spanish Armada, and you can see what a tremendous boost this was to the ego of the Americans when they beat the Spanish and picked up Cuba and Puerto Rico, and freed Cuba, picked up Puerto Rico and the Philippines. Now, this is John Hayes Hammond. In the O'Neill book, which, my own opinion, I think it's a fantastic book, but it does have a few errors here and there. O'Neill said that Hammond had given Tesla $10,000 for the torpedo boat. Well, I checked Hammond's life, and it turns out he was in South Africa at the time. In fact, he had been arrested by the Boers during the Boer War, so he couldn't possibly have given Tesla $10,000 at that time. It was later, in linking it with his son. Hammond was a diamond and gold miner in the United States and also in South Africa. These are the Boers, and they did not like the British coming in. The Boers were Dutch and German. And these are the trekkers that they roamed through the area, and they hated that the British and the Americans were coming in and putting up the diamond mines. So they arrested Hammond and Cecil Rhodes, and that's Cecil Rhodes from Rhodesia, and they kept them arrested. And it's a very funny story about Mark Twain. Twain was on a world tour, and he came to South Africa, and he was very famous in South Africa, and Hammond was arrested along with Rhodes, and Twain said, I hear you have some very expensive bugs in your prison. And the officer said, what do you mean? He said, well, you have $1 million bugs in your prison. And they suddenly realized that these people were much better. They were sentenced to be hanged. They were worth more alive than dead. And so Rhodes paid $600,000, $125,000 apiece, and got all the men out, and those were advances against the monies that they were going to take in their diamond mines. And then Hammond went to England. And here's a letter from Mark Twain to Tesla about the same exact time all this was happening. Twain was in Tesla's lab in 1894, and I think he was in South Africa in 1896.
Could you back up that letter?
This letter simply says that he could not make it this particular day. He showed up a few days later. I'm sorry that I can't make it today. I'm dreadfully pushed for time, but he shows up at the lab a few days later. And T.C. Martin, who we'll see in a few minutes, was the man who wrote the article, the famous article that this picture appeared in the Century magazine. This was Kruger. The Krugerrands named after him. He was the one who had arrested Hammond and Cecil Rhodes. He was Dutch. Rudyard Kipling also traveled to South Africa. He was a friend of Tesla's. There's a great letter at Columbia University where Tesla says that Kipling had invited him to dinner in a very shabby hotel where he was sure to find hair and cockroaches in the soup. And Kipling had met Hammond on the boat going over from England to South Africa, and he talked Rhodes into going to the front lines. So the Boer War played an important part in the background of Tesla's life. Marconi had supplied the wireless transmitters that the Rhodes used, and they eventually beat the Boers. This is a letter where Tesla says to the Johnsons, "My dear Luca, if you have visitors, ordinary mortals, I will not come. If you have Paderewski, Rentgen, or Mrs. Anthony, I will come. Please answer." And you see just a beautiful handwriting, a lot of rhythm and speed, and a giant N, very warm handwriting. This is Robert Underwood Johnson. This is a picture of him later in life. Just a wonderful man. As Dr. Marinchens mentioned, once you start reading the letters, you get trapped in there and you're stuck for a long period of time. And this is Johnson's handwriting. You get a feeling of a very caring, whimsical man. Katherine Johnson, who I won't talk about today, but she certainly had very strong feelings for Tesla, a love affair of some level, probably a platonic love affair, but she certainly loved Tesla. And this is Paderewski, who Tesla refers to as Miss Paderewski. I think it's a joke referring to his long hair. He was a brilliant pianist. He was the highest paid performer of the day, and he eventually became Prime Minister of Poland. Okay, then there was the backlash against the Tesla, this announcement that he could have the ship go any place. By allowing the following editorial to appear in his journal, Electrical Engineer. It's not this particular editorial, but Thomas Comerford Martin was the first to lead the assault. He attacked Tesla. Martin didn't write this, but he allowed it to appear in his journal. It was called Mr. Tesla and the Tsar. The personality of Mr. Tesla is one of the most fascinating, even if he had done nothing more than develop the alternating current polyphase system. We cannot number ourselves among those who are impatient with his tendency to let imagination overtake achievement, and will virtually class him as a humbug. Mr. Tesla fools himself, if he fools anybody, when he launches into the dazzling theories and speculations associated with his name. Just of late, Mr. Tesla has been given publicity to some of the newest work, and it is particularly interesting. We should be glad, personally, to see him finish up some of the many other things that have occupied his energies his 10 years past, but none of which now claim any place. Discredit of the wireless torpedo boat followed. Tesla claims he can transmit large quantities of current from New York to Paris, but Marconi has already transmitted telegraph from balloon to balloon without wires over 20 miles, thus proving in advance the tenability of Mr. Tesla's proposition. Then the attack on the boat. Its advent introduces into warfare an element which never existed before, a fighting machine without men as a means of attack and defense. The continuous development in this direction must ultimately make war a mere context of machines without men, and this is Tesla talking, I'm sorry, and without loss of life, a condition which will lead, in my opinion, to permanent peace. Tesla felt that if you had this, that machines would do the fighting and humans wouldn't, and because this machine was so accurate and so terrible that it would do away with war. This idea has been promulgated more recently by Edward Teller, the whole idea of the bomb, that the bomb would do away would end wars because the bomb was so terrible. And also Ronald Reagan proposed the same idea with Star Wars. Let's give Star Wars to the Russians, so they'll have this terrible weaponry system and we'll have this terrible weaponry system, and therefore there will be no war. Tesla and Einstein also, who originally believed in this concept, they both changed their mind, regretting the initial view about how agents of Armageddon could lead humans to peace. Mr. Hewitt, a Frenchman, writing an electrical review at the turn of the century, called Tesla the genius of destruction. The man who could make the discovery of the devil automaton knows how to reassure us. Like all inventors of destructive machines, he claims that his instrument will make the governments which are inclined to create international conflagrations hesitate. On this account, Nikola Tesla claims a right to be called a benefactor of humanity. The genius of destruction would seem to have then two aims. It creates evil but mostly good. Through its help, the abolition of war may no longer be a utopia of generous dreamers. A blessed era will open up to the people whose quarrels will be settled in view of the terror of the cataclysm promised by science. What contradictions of conception is the human mind subject to? Then in Martin's article, Martin himself didn't write this, but this was what the article said in his magazine. All we wish to say is that it is not fair to condemn, as many do, Mr. Tesla as a visionary and impractical. Now listen to these two sentences. No man has finished his work till he is dead, and even then there are long, long centuries in which his ideas can prove themselves true. The visionaries are thus often in the end the most sordid of realists, something Mr. Tesla will never be. Sounds like double talk to me, but one way or another it's an attack. Guilt by association. And here's the article with Keeley. Keeley was the Keeley motor. Keeley's motor was supposed to mote, and it never moted. And it never moted for like 25 years. And Keeley raised tens of thousands of dollars. In fact, Astor gave money to the Keeley motor. And Keeley was arrested for the motor. And they eventually found he was using compressed air in a secret tube. Was Keeley a charlatan? This was on the same page. You see Science and Sensationalism. Tesla's name is mentioned, and Keeley, all at this time. In the death of Keeley, of the Keeley motor fame, the world has been robbed of one of its most unique and fascinating characters. Some 25 years ago, Keeley, a former circus sleight-of-hand performer, announced a hydropneumatic pulsating vacuo engine that went supposedly on its own accord. Keeley's chief accomplishment was a ready use of jargon, of scientific and unscientific terms. He talked about the triune currents of a polar flow of force, the reflex action of gravity, chords of mass, sympathetic outreaches of distance, dipolar etheric waves, and a lot of other things which didn't mean anything. He never told why his motor moted and never took a patent. He's always had a different name for it every year. Keeley was always going to start of the world, but never did. It is sincerely to be hoped that Keeley's alleged secrets have died with him. Science and Sensationalism, that's this article here. That the author of the multi-phase system of transmission should at this late date be flooding the press, he's talking about the remote control boat, with rhetorical bombast that recalls the wildest days of the Keeley motor mania is inconsistent and inexplicable to the last degree. The facts of Mr. Tesla's invention are few and simple are the fancies which have been woven around it, are many and extravagant. The principles of the invention are not new, nor was Tesla the original discoverer. This, of course, extremely upset Tesla because he was the original discoverer of all of this, and it harked back to the attacks against Tesla that he wasn't the original discoverer of the AC polyphase system. There's T.C. Martin facing the other way, and you see over here Charles Batchelor. Batchelor was Edison's closest friend, and Batchelor had hired Tesla in Paris in 1882. I also found evidence that Batchelor did not write the letter, I know two great men in my life, Mr. Edison, you are one of them, and Tesla's the other man, because I found that first of all, Edison met Tesla in Paris in 1882, and also Batchelor was back in New York by the time Tesla arrived in 1884, so he didn't have to write a letter. Tesla was forced to reply to Martin, and this was the end of the close relationship between Tesla and Martin. They became friends later again, but qualitatively the relationship had changed. This is Tesla's reply to those attacks. On more than one occasion you have offended me, but in my qualities both as Christian and philosopher I have always forgiven you and only pitied you for your errors. This time, though, your offense is graver than the previous ones, for you have dared to cast a shadow on my honor. Now, what Tesla, I think, is talking about is his oscillators. Martin said in the editorial that it was in the scrap heap, that he'd given it up. Tesla was trying to get, and he eventually did get, $50,000 from Astor. And Astor was giving him the money predominantly for the oscillators and for the fluorescent tubes. That's why there was a falling out between Astor and Tesla, because when Tesla moved to Colorado, he took the $50,000 to set up the wireless transmission. Astor, I think, was really expecting him to promote the oscillators and the fluorescent lighting. This is Tesla continuing. Being a bearer of high honors from a number of American universities, it is my duty in view of this slur to exact from you a complete and humble apology. He's asking Martin to apologize. On this condition I will again forgive you, but I would advise you to limit yourself in your future attacks to statements which are not liable to be punished by law. In other words, Tesla had every inclination to finish the oscillators and the fluorescent tubes. Martin's response was published right after Tesla's letter. His friends to Mr. Tesla. Our foremost electrical inventor, unnamed, probably Elihu Thomson, has been kind enough to say that the electrical engineer has made Mr. Tesla. Martin disputed this statement as a person's actions make the person. However, the journal, that is to say Martin, did cite the fact that in the past it published Tesla's articles and books on his inventions and lectures, and further that it was their editor, Martin, who has striven with all the ability possessed to explain Mr. Tesla's idea. In studying all of this, I think that Martin played a great role in bringing Tesla out. Tesla was very shy, and he didn't want to talk in front of people, and it was Martin who coaxed him out. And if any of you have ever edited somebody's work, you know how difficult it is. That the 1894 book was edited by Martin. I think it took a tremendous amount of work. And Tesla was handing out books left and right to people in Pittsburgh, and he wasn't paying for the books. He also borrowed money from Martin, and he never paid Martin back. So Martin was angry with Tesla. This is Keeley, and you see the Keeley motor, and it's not moting. And this is T.C. Martin. So Martin, I think, was in a very difficult position. Martin was also a good friend of Tom Edison's, and he became closely associated with Elihu Thomson, and he knew Marconi, and he knew Steinmetz, and he knew a lot of the people that opposed Tesla. Martin was an editor, and he had to be objective in writing. If Tesla was writing that his remote control boat could do all these amazing things, and Tesla presenting it almost as if it was magic, Martin was kind of placed in a difficult position. Plus, Tesla had not promoted the oscillator to the point of making it a sale, nor had he promoted the fluorescent tubes. So Martin, in a sense, was trying to push Tesla along. But on the other hand, I think Tesla was extremely prolific. He built all these working models. The oscillators and the lamps did work, and so did the wireless system, at least in part, was successfully demonstrated. So Tesla, I think, had proven himself, but he had not proven himself in the marketplace. Tesla's, I'm going to now talk about Tesla's relationship to Ernst Mach and Carl Stumpf. Tesla's teleautomaton remains one of the single most important technological triumphs of the modern age. In its final form, it was conceived of as a new mechanical species capable of thinking as humans do, capable of carrying out complex assignments, and even capable of reproduction. C-3PO and R2-D2, the fictional robotic heroes from the George Lucas film Star Wars, remain perhaps the closest models to what Tesla was envisioning in 1898. The invention also comprised all the essential features in wireless transmission and selective tuning. Here was a true work of genius. Surprisingly, Tesla was an adherent of the stimulus-response model for explaining human behavior and consciousness, rather than a proponent of a model espousing a creative unconscious. According to Tesla, All ideas did not spring from the unconscious, but he believed in the whole idea of the tabula rasa, the blank slate, and every impression that he got from someplace outside his body, and that was what the robot was. It received impulses from outside the body, so it would mechanically represent him. Where did Tesla get his ideas? One of the most important teachers at the University of Prague was Ernst Mach. In 1880, Tesla had gone to the University of Prague. He had not taken courses specifically with Mach, but Mach was also a teacher at the University of Graz when Tesla was at Graz. Mach was the head of the physics department, and he was the one who conceived of the idea of supergravity, which states that all stars in the universe influence each other by a means of gravitational attraction. This principle, which today is still a basic tenet in quantum physics and cosmology, directly influenced Einstein's theory of relativity. As we shall see, it also influenced Tesla's thinking, although it appears that Tesla did not specifically take Mach's courses. Both men had transferred from the University of Graz during the same years, but one as a teacher and one as a student. On campus, there was a famous rivalry between Mach and Carl Stumpf, who was Tesla's philosophy teacher. This is Mach's studies of sound, and Tesla, I think, got the idea of the sound of the electromagnetic wave being a radiation wave, as Hertz said, and a longitudinal wave, or like a sound wave. I think he got the ideas from Mach and from Stumpf. These are the galaxies and the whole idea of supergravity. There is the mention of Carl Stumpf. He was interested in the psychology of sound. And Stumpf's teacher was Brentano. Brentano was also Freud's teacher. So finally I found a link between Tesla and Freud. They were both born in the same year, and Tesla's philosophy teacher took courses with Freud's teacher. This is Heinrich Hertz. On campus, there was a famous rivalry between Mach and Carl Stumpf, Tesla's philosophy teacher. Stumpf had been a student of Brentano. Raised as a child prodigy of music, the acerbic and sharp-nosed Stumpf was an expert on the psychology of sound and the influence of musical tones on sense perception. Mach was an expert on the physics of sound, and Tesla took from both individuals. He gained his behavioral thinking from Stumpf's course on David Hume and his idea that electrical waves had a twofold structure from Mach, which I just talked about. Stumpf's attack upon Mach, they hated each other, lasted over 30 years, was based ostensibly on Mach's concept of psychophysical parallelism, adapted from Fechner's work. What I'm trying to deal with here is that Tesla said that this remote control boat was a robot. This was the beginning of R2-D2, of HAL, the HAL computer, of all artificial intelligence. Where did he get these ideas? They actually stem from what today is known as behaviorism. Mach stated that for every mental event there was to be a corresponding physical action. This idea correlated precisely with Stumpf's position. What he objected to was Mach's further supposition on the nature of space, time, and consciousness. Passionately against the tendency towards anthropomorphism, Mach argued that space and time were human constructs and not absolute things in themselves. This position, from Stumpf's point of view, is wholly untenable. Stumpf took his idea of the tabula rasa from Hume, and also from John Locke and Aristotle, and also from Descartes. And I'll have a little section where Tesla talks about Descartes and the automaton. This is the hierarchy of intelligence, and you start with the early primates, and you have early man. What would be the next level of intelligence would be artificial intelligence. Tesla felt that he had invented a new species on the planet, and this species was made out of wires and steel. The teleautomaton also paralleled precisely a model developed in the story of the well-known writer Bulwer Lytton. Bulwer Lytton was as popular as Charles Dickens of the day. Although Tesla insisted in a letter to Johnson that he didn't get the idea from Lytton's work, The Coming Race, it's such a close concept to vril power that it's hard to believe that Tesla didn't take his ideas from The Coming Race. This is from The Coming Race, which was written in 1870. In all service, whether in or out of doors, they, the people of Vrilya, that's V-R-I-L, make great use of automaton figures, which are so ingenious and so pliant to the operations of vril that they actually seem gifted with reason. It was scarcely possible to distinguish the figures I beheld. He went under the earth and met the people of Vril and saw these figures. They apparently went around guiding by superintending the rapid movements of vast engines. I couldn't tell these automatons from human forms endowed with thought. Paradoxically, although Tesla's achievement was highly original, and though he touted himself as the creator of new principles, in no way did the inventor think that he had ever produced a new idea that did not stem from something external. A reader of great philosophers, Tesla understood the full impact of the adoption of the teleautomaton would mean for the world. He saw clearly the implications inherent in the coming race. Machines would not only replace laborers, they would think for themselves. Tesla's genius, therefore, was in the appreciation of the advanced thinking of others, such as Descartes and Hume and Stumpf and the willpower idea, and more importantly, in implementing on a practical basis their abstract ideas. Where others sought to change the world with thoughts, Tesla manifested on the physical plane real working models. Concerning the age of robots, he certainly was the father of remote control electronic beings, but he would be the last to state that he was the father of the idea. He writes about Descartes, that he got the idea from Descartes. And in the Century article in 1900, he says, "I have by every thought and every act of mine demonstrated, and do so daily to my absolute satisfaction, that I am an automaton endowed with the power of movement, which merely responds to external stimuli beating upon my sense organs, and thinks and acts accordingly. I remember only one or two cases in my whole life where I was unable to locate the first impression which prompted a movement or a thought or even a dream." It's interesting that one of the two cases was his inspiration, which led to the development of the alternating current polyphase system. So there is an irony to Tesla's life. In other words, I think that he did have a creative unconscious and that some thoughts did stem from real inspiration. But he didn't admit to that. This is a study of the brain. And this is the idea of that the next being will be an intelligent being which will think. And it all stems from the teleautomaton, the remote control boat. This is inside Tesla's lab. And here, my favorite picture, I show it all the time when I speak. But also you see a wireless transmission of power is igniting this fluorescent light. And so then Tesla moved to Colorado in 1899 and did his famous experiments here. And this picture here, in the O'Neill book, they said that it's 26 miles away, but it seems it was only a few hundred yards from the lab. But in any event, lighting lamps by means of resonance for a few hundred yards away certainly showed that he could transmit power over distances without wires. Here's a picture of Tesla. I'm going to get to the Hammond connection, show the relationship between Tesla and John Hayes Hammond. This was an interesting picture Tesla took in his lab of electrical effects. Before Tesla linked up with Hammond Jr., Hammond's son, he formed a partnership with Morgan. And here's Tesla's handwriting in 1905. Still looks very strong and powerful. And this is the Wardenclyffe Plant, which still was in existence. The Wardenclyffe Plant, one way or another, basically closed in 1906. It was built about 1901, 1902, and he had run out of funds, and he continually asked Morgan for the money, and Morgan refused to give him the money, and Morgan scuttled his attempts to gain funding from Frick and Schiff and Thomas Fortune Ryan and others. And this is Morgan. This is the contract between Tesla and Morgan. Inside Wardenclyffe.
No, the letter.
The letter? I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter of the 1st, together with assignments of interest in various patents on the schedule of assignments handed therewith, and conform the understanding therein expressed. It's a very clear letter. What Morgan did was tie the fluorescent lighting patents. Tesla had the fight with the Astor, and Morgan tied the fluorescent lighting patents. So when Morgan refused to give money to Tesla on the wireless transmission of power, he also controlled the lighting patents, and that's why they never amounted to anything. Can we change the bulb? After a short stay in England, the Hammonds returned to the United States about 1901 and set up residence in Washington, D.C. Hammond Sr. also had an office in Wall Street and a summer home in New Jersey. Having a keen interest in inventors, the mining engineer invited many of them to his home. In 1901, when Jack Hammond, which is Hammond Jr., was just 12 years old, he was invited to Tom Edison's laboratory. This is the crash of the stock market. This is an interesting picture of Morgan and Rankine, one of Tesla's members of Tesla's company, owner of his company, and also the developer of the Niagara Power Project. Oh, this is another thing that Tesla was involved in, harnessing the sun. He had solar energy machines. And this is a device which was shown in 1892 at the World's Fair, combining this device with the brush lamp that he showed around 1891, 1892 at Columbia University and also in London. You have some of the precursors of the television. I'm not sure particularly how this worked, but one possible way is there could be many wires underneath here. There could be a grid of wires here. And there could be, let's say, 500 wires connected by a cable to a mile or 2 miles away, and the same sheet set up. So if you hit specific wires, they will chemically change the paper, and you could handwrite over here and then handwrite over there. And when you study Tesla's paper on the history of television, you see that the TV eventually evolved out of this simple process. Tesla was experimenting with transmitting pictures in 1898. There were others in Germany who successfully did it. I don't know if Tesla ever successfully did it, but he certainly worked on it. Here's Marconi, who in 1902 transmitted energy using Tesla oscillators from England to America. And this is the Marconi setup. It's very important to look at because you'll see its relationship to Hammond's setup a few years later. This is Hammond meeting Edison. This is Jack Hammond, young Jack Hammond, with the father, the one who had been arrested in South Africa, meeting Edison about 1902 or 1903. That's Hammond on the right and Hammond's father. It's possible that Tesla visited Hammond at this time, around 1905, 1906, to interest Hammond Sr. in wireless operations. Thus, it was at this time, during Hammond Jr.'s college years, this is Hammond's house, and he has a couple of castles. This was the first one that he built. This is Hammond Sr.'s house. The Moonies now own it. You can't get there. Wow, this is the closest I could get. I could have waded through the water, but this was as close as I could get.
Where's it located?
In Gloucester.
Gloucester?
Yeah.
Oh, up in the mountains,
Right by the castle, just a mile down the road. There's this Hammond, Jack Hammond. He went to Yale University. He asked Tesla to speak at graduation, and one of his other friends was Alexander Graham Bell. Tesla and Bell were, so to speak, my scientific godfathers, Jack wrote in his diary. I found them deeply inspiring. Jack's experiments started in the early 1908. He was about 20 years old when he developed an electrical steering and also an engine control for a boat, finding that he could control this mechanism over short distances with a radio impulse. The Hammonds set up a permanent residence in the harbor in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and Tom Edison he visited, and famous inventors came there. John Hayes Hammond Jr., Jack Hammond, by the time of his death, had amassed an astounding array of over 800 patents, including inventions in the field of military warfare, music, and sound. He's not related to the Hammond of the electrical organ fame. And home appliances. Some of Jack's most unique contributions include a cigarette case which popped out with a lit cigarette, precursor to the microwave oven, push-button radio, a super heterodyne coincident with Edward Armstrong, aircraft guidance systems, a time-controlled gas bomb, magnetic bottle cap, combination piano, radio, phonograph, windshield washer, mobile housing unit, And listen to this one, a telesterographer, or a mechanism for projecting three-dimensional images via wireless. In 1909, during the senior year, the 21-year-old budding savant wrote to his father to arrange for a meeting with the Serbian high priest of teleautomatics. Father, I have a strong, important information that I desire to get from Mr. Tesla. This is Hammond Sr. with Taft. Hammond Sr. was trying to run for vice president. He was the only man ever to seek the vice presidency as an office. He thought it was a very prominent office and it was worth seeking. He didn't get it. He stepped down because they wanted someone else and he didn't want a controversy, but he almost became vice president, and therefore you could see that he was close to becoming president of the United States. Jack Hammond, the younger Jack, met the 53-year-old Tesla at his Metropolitan Towers office in New York the week of September 26, I think 1908 or 1909, and it is most likely that Tesla reciprocated by visiting Gloucester shortly thereafter. By means of wireless, by this time Jack had rigged a 40-foot vessel to be maneuvered by means of wireless. His broadcasting system, in part based upon a Marconi design but utilizing Tesla oscillators, contained two 360-foot radio control towers near the laboratory overlooking Freshwater Cove. With these devices, a man standing on a shore lookout station could steer an empty boat in the water. Hammond Jr. also asked Tesla to speak at his graduation. Well, that's Hammond Sr. running for vice president. Tesla in his lab. Here's Hammond. The year of Tesla's first meetings with Hammond Jr. was particularly painful because Marconi was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1909 for his piracy. Hammond Jr., however, had no ill will towards Marconi and included him prominently in his 4-volume dissertation he wrote for school on the history of remote control. Mr. Tesla, in 1892, Hammond wrote, showed that the true Hertzian effect was not a means by which it was possible for sending station to communicate with a receiving station at any great distance. He demonstrated furthermore that waves propagated at a transmitting station traveled along the ground as a conductor. Today, 1912, it is acknowledged that these views are correct. It was, however, left to the splendid enterprise of Marconi to crystallize the results of previous investigators into a complete and practical system of space telegraphy. In 1897, Marconi transmitted messages at distance 8.7 miles. Today, Mr. Marconi says that the maximum effect is 6,000 miles. Marconi also visited Hammond. By 1908, Tesla was working to perfect his bladeless steam turbines, which he was working on. These would make excellent engines for Jack's planned remote-controlled torpedoes. With his characteristic humor, barbed with some fear of the truth, Tesla wrote, Dear Mr. John J. Hayes Hammond Jr., I got this from Leland Anderson. I was glad to read the enclosed news report. This is a water on my mill. Just make a lot of money, then I will sue for infringement, and we will divide and make a lot of money. Yours truly, Nikola Tesla. Soon a partnership was formed, Hammond Sr. footing the bill. These are the brothers. Hammond Sr. said, go in on this with your brother Harris. He is older than you and more experienced, and be careful with Mr. Tesla. Jack's father warned before the deal was finalized. He tends to spend gold as if it were copper. Jack was had naturally studied Tesla's method of selective tuning, which he called in his 1903 Prophetic Genius patent. Tesla had noticed in 1890, I talked about this, that he had the two combinations of two or more frequencies. This is the whole idea behind the scrambler also. You have two different frequencies would trigger one response, and Hammond called this the Prophetic Genius patent. This patent, along with Tesla's method of utilizing resonant earth frequencies for transmission, that is, Tesla currents, became the backbone of a plethora of military guidance systems which Hammond Jr. would come to design. In 1911, Jack contacted the U.S. Wireless Department with the hopes of selling them a ship-to-shore communication system capable of transmitting 20 words per minute. Dear Mr. Tesla, I have attached my chariot to a star. Let us create an unpretentious company and call it the Tesla Hammond Wireless Development Company. Yours sincerely, John Hayes Hammond Jr. Tesla began to work on his turbines in earnest at the Edison plant and also looked for prospective clients. One of his plans was to sell 500 engines to the Japanese. By applying my turbine to their torpedo, Tesla wrote Jack's brother Harris, I can double the power. We should negotiate royalties on the basis of horsepower. Tesla also was negotiating with General Electric, the Seifer Company, the developers of high-speed power boats. Promising great success, Tesla worked overtime on the turbines as Jack continued perfecting a prototype remote-operated boat and wireless broadcasting station, which soon had a range of 2,000 miles, making it the most important private sending station in the world. Jack had also studied telephotography and worked on perfecting electric. This is in 1914. I have a better picture of this electric dog. Here you see Jack's transmitting station. You see it looks just like Marconi's. And on the right is the boat that was operated by means of wireless. This boat, he traveled all the way from Gloucester to Newport Naval Base with wireless.
But you can make journals readable by the system.
There's the boat. What's very curious, and I was discussing this with Leland about it, and that is that Tesla did not work so much in his partnership with Hammond to develop the wireless transmission. He was more involved with building the turbines. And the question remains as to why didn't Tesla get more involved with the guidance system and less involved with the turbines. Tesla's plan was to replace the automobile engine. He still wanted to resurrect Wardenclyffe. That was his most important thing. If you look back, this was in no way like Wardenclyffe, and in a kind of a way, it was an insult to Tesla that Hammond would use this kind of apparatus, and I think he didn't want to get involved in trying to support a Marconi design, and that's why he didn't get involved in the guidance aspect of it, even though it was his patents that were being used. Tesla's plan was to refine the turbines so that he would generate capital to reopen Wardenclyffe. His 15-story ghostly tower, which had been laying in cobwebs for nearly a decade. The wizard expanded his market by designing prototypes that could replace the gasoline engine for the automobile. He had possible openings with the Ford Motor Company and also the German government. As with any new creation, there were problems. For instance, the ball bearings were wearing down too quickly and required more capital. As a sun dodger, he tended to work at night, and this doubled the amount of money that he had to pay his workers. Throughout the latter part of 1912 and through the first months of the new year, Tesla sent urgent pleas to his partner. He had expended $18,000, had worked without salary, and for all this time, he required $10,000 immediately. Dear Mr. Hammond, in desperate need of money, I am unable to hold out any longer. I'm sorry about that.
Access method, like RMS.
This is the little robotic critter, or the dog. Looking more like a milk carton with wheels than a furry canine, was operated by means of selenium cells. It got its name because it would follow you at night as long as you walked with a lantern. And if you reverse the motion by pushing over the tail switch, you can make the dog back away, most surprisingly, in either direction when you advance upon him with the light. Now, Hammond's father was one of the wealthiest men in the world. He had paid $125,000, which was not much money, to get himself out of jail. They were worth great amounts of money, and Tesla had sent this plea. Hammond ignored the request, his brother Harris taking a full quarter of a year, 3 months, to respond to Tesla's letter. In 1913, Dear Mr. Tesla, as you know, we have advanced a great many thousands of dollars in the development of this turbine and have expected each week the past year to be in a position to have tested it. Now we find that the turbine is only partially set up at the Edison plant. We are missing a splendid opportunity of having it thoroughly and honestly tested by people who would be the greatest benefit to us should these tests prove successful. Sincerely yours, Harris Hammond. The high priest of teleautomatics was incapable of believing that the son of one of the richest men in the world was scorning his entreaty. Since my notice, Tesla wrote, I have done the best I could to save what was possible. The sacrifices which I have been compelled to make and the losses which I have suffered are such that if I were dealing with a man less attractive to me than yourself, I would disdain to answer. Tesla also enclosed glowing testament to the turbine from various professors and chief engineers, but the partnership was over. Hammond would not come through. Tesla then formed a partnership with J.P. Morgan Jr., who's on the right. Morgan's in the center. Morgan Jr. gave Tesla in about 1914, over the next year or two, about $25,000. This is a letter from Morgan Jr. I received your letter December 19th and am quite willing to extend the old loan. I don't think Tesla ever paid back the $25,000. He was asking for $10,000 from Hammond, and he didn't get the $10,000. I think he needed maybe $60,000 or $100,000 to finish the turbines. There was too many problems because the $25,000 was not enough. Tesla eventually did reap rewards from Alice Chalmers. I think he eventually got in the neighborhood of $40,000 for the turbines, but it was too little too late, and the system, and he didn't have enough money to complete Wardenclyffe. Morgan was shot at during World War I. He was actually wounded. This is a letter in 1916. Various Navy personnel were going up, admirals, to see Hammond's boat work. And this is an article about 1920 of the Tesla Wardenclyffe guidance system operating an airplane. And this is a modern one. This is from the New York Times maybe a year or two ago, using microwaves on the right. The Germans were involved in using wireless transmission. Tesla needed money to pay the Waldorf Astoria, and they ripped down the tower in 1917, about 2 or 3 years after the Hammond connection ended.
The access count drops to 0 for a temporary journal.
While Hammond Jr. was building torpedoes and guidance systems, Hammond Sr. was trying to create the League of Nations. It's just a picture of wireless transmission. This is Marconi and Sarnoff. In about 1923, Hammond Jr. finally was able to get money from the government. They owed him about $400,000, and he eventually got about $500,000 from the government for all of his work. It took him 10 years, though, so in 1914 is when his relationship with Tesla ended. It took him 10 years later. Hammond was a young man. He was still in his 30s when he got paid, but it was much too late to be of any use to Tesla. Hammond then sold a lot of radio patents to RCA. He got $250,000, so around 1925 he was a millionaire all on his own. So he was closely linked to Marconi and also to Sarnoff. And here you see mention of a letter from the Secretary of War for the $250,000 that they owed Hammond from the National Archives. This is the castle that Hammond thereupon built in the late 1920s. This castle still stands as a museum. It's an excellent place. And inside here, there are all chimes. There's an organ down here. This whole castle is built up to have an organ, and it's just a coincidence of the other Hammond. This is a real pipe organ. It's the largest private pipe organ in the world. It's got 8,000 tubes. And Lois and myself went there, and we heard a concert. We heard the fellow play Phantom of the Opera, and he rocked us out of our seats. It was amazing. And there's the organ inside the castle. So Hammond built a castle in Gloucester, Massachusetts, near Boston. This is Mr. Pettibone. He's the head of the Hammond Museum, and he dresses up as Dr. Hammond. So he's now Dr. Hammond, and he gives the tour. This is a picture of the castle. It was supposed to be taller, but for various reasons he decided not to. And there's a moat here. Hammond went to Europe, and he bought all original work, artifacts, and brought them back. And he had an atrium and a pool in here, and he used to dive off into the pool. Beautiful place, definitely worth visiting. This is Hammond, and when he got married, his wife bought a fig leaf. So we see that Hammond also had vanity. And here you see the moat in the castle. And Tesla at this time, 1917, was having articles in Electrical Experimenter where this concept was being dealt with. These are people. Hammond knew Steikovsky, and he knew Morgan's children and Edison's children. They all visited the castle. Helen Hayes, very famous actors and actresses, they all went to concerts in the 1930s. Tesla was reduced to having stationery. That was what was left of his tower. And so he never really cashed in on all of Hammond's successes. Just a picture of the times of a radio transmitting car. No, I think it was a car that picked up a radio and spoke. Tesla made, though, in 1931 the cover of Time magazine. And he also got involved with the death ray. So Tesla was involved with a lot of weaponry systems. He had mixed feelings about weapons. He thought, on the one hand, that if we built terrible weapons, it would prevent wars from happening. But on the other hand, he also knew that they could be misused. And Hammond was involved in secret frequencies. This is an article on Hammond's various guided waves. Hammond also worked in using television as a weapon in war in the 1930s, scrambling images. He had a secret laboratory up in the castle. And Tesla was still working with cosmic rays and mystical ideas as well. This is Hammond in the 1950s. Had 800 patents. He has more patents than anybody except for Edison. And in the 1940s, the Tesla, that boat is named the Tesla, was created in honor of Tesla by the U.S. Navy. So I think that in a way it's a shame these two geniuses got together, but there were various conflicts and they did not work out. This is a picture of the statue of Tesla in Gospic. And that basically is my talk. It's just a shame that it did not work out, but there was a lot of interesting connections between the two men. Thank you very much. Yes?
I want to comment with respect to Mark's ability to delve new ideas. We have a possible further contribution to Tesla to world culture, and it remains for someone to dig this out and get how it works. It is said in literary fields that code words, when translated into French by Mallarmé, set off the symbolist revival in Europe. And it's very likely that the automaton of Tesla, when seen by Marinetti, for example, resulted in a futurist manifesto, set off a literary school in Europe that resulted in the poetry of Mayakovsky, and came back to the United States in the arts of fashion, the Time magazine design. And that is a major current in European literature, which was thought of as having been developed by Marinetti in Italy. It could have been Tesla's influence. Notably, the idea that the inside of your mind is full of sealed and you can make it work. That's essentially future.
Yeah, excuse me, we have a quick announcement. They're just about ready to fire the coil.